Hello, welcome to Economic Management and Policy Analysis class. And we'll continue as we move to the eighth module, module 8 of the course. And this is on policy analysis framework and tools, policy analysis framework and tools. And we are going to look at the policy circle, which talks about formulation, implementation, and evaluation. We will also look at the quantitative method of which talks analysis, which talks about the regression cost benefit analysis and input output model. We'll look at the qualitative method also, looking at the stakeholders analysis and case study. We will look at the policy simulation and forecasting tool and evidence-based policy making. These are the things we will look at in this module. When we talk about policy analysis, this is a systematic approach to understanding, evaluating, and improving public policy. And it provides decision makers with the evidence and insights that are needed to formulate effective policy, anticipate potential outcome, and also ensure that resources are efficiently allocated to achieve desired objective. And also, policy formulation combines both analytical framework and practical tools to examine problems, access alternative course of action, and support decision-making processes in government and organization. Looking at the policy circle, a policy circle is the conceptual framework used to understand the life of a public policy from its inception to its outcome, and it provides a structured approach to analyze the stages through which policies are designed, executed, and evaluated. And the circle is actually not limited to the three that we'll be discussing. However, the policy circle encapsulates the agenda setting, the formulation, adoption, implementation, evaluation, and support management. And as such, we'll be looking at the formulation, the implementation, and the evaluation in this presentation. And when we talk about policy formulation, it is the foundational stage where government identifies societal problems and design strategies to address them. And this stage involves rigorous analysis, stakeholders consultation, and careful planning to ensure proposed intervention are visible and equitable and effective. This stage involves multiple steps, and the first step is problem identification, where you recognize and define a problem that requires government attention. The next step is agenda setting, which deals with prioritizing issues based on urgency, public interest, and political feasibility. The next step is policy design after the setting agenda, and this deals with developing alternatives and strategies, defining objective, exploring options, and also assessing visibility. And the next also is stakeholders consultation. After the policy design, the next is stakeholder consultation, and it involves various stakeholders to it is involving various stakeholders to ensure the policy reflect diverse needs and improve legitimacy. The fifth step is the evidence-based approach, which talks about the relying on data, research, and analytical tools to predict outcome and identify risk. And the last step for policy formulation is policy documentation, where it's clearly outlining the problem, the objective, the strategies, and expected outcome for clarity during implementation and evaluation stage. We move to policy implementation, and this is where formulated policies are translated into concrete actions and programs, and it is the process through which government intention are put into practice. to achieve desired objective. And for this, we talk about key aspects like resource allocation, dealing with ensuring sufficient funding, skill, personnel, and necessary um, infrastructure. Also, we talk about the institutional coordination. It talks about collaboration among government agency, private sector, and civil society, and also the operational planning, which deals with the translating objectives into actionable steps with clear timeline and responsibility. We still have some other in the notes we can go through. And the challenges of policy implementation are the aspect of resource constraints. It talks about insufficient funding or personnel. Another challenge is the delay due to complex administrative process. Also, changes in government priorities is also another challenge. And lastly, lack of public support or opposition also is another challenge that affects policy implementation. And for policy evaluation, it is a systematic assessment of the policy design, implementation, and outcome to determine its effectiveness, efficiency, and relevance. And it provides critical feedback to inform revisions, future policy making. And policy evaluation serves multiple purposes, which include assessing effectiveness, that is, determining if objective were achieved. Another purpose is enhancing accountability, that is, holding policymakers responsible for the outcome. And also, another purpose of policy evaluation is guiding improvement, deals with identifying weaknesses for future designs. And lastly, the resource optimization, it deals with ensuring efficient use of financial and human resources. And the types of policy evaluation can be formative, which is during design, and the summative, which is after the implementation. We also have the process, which is how it was implemented, and the impact, it deals with the broader effects of the implementation of the policy itself. That's the quantitative method. We have two methods in doing this, and in doing analysis. We have the quantitative and we have the qualitative. And when we talk about the quantitative method, these are using of numerical data to assess, predict, and evaluate policy outcome, providing objective evidence for decision. And this can be under the quantitative method. The regression analysis as a method, the cost benefit analysis, and also the input output model, which are the methods used under quantitative method. And for regression analysis, it examines relation between variables to predict the outcome and identify determinant. An example of it is how education spending affects literacy rates. Another is cost benefit analysis, which compares total expected cost with anticipated benefits to determine economic efficiency. An example of this is the highway construction cost versus reduced travel time. Last is the input-output model, and this deals with analysis dependencies among economic sector to understand the ripple effect of policy intervention. And an example of this is investment in cement industry affecting construction and transport. The policy method, this provides insight into the social, institutional, and behavioral dimension of policy, capturing aspects not reviewed by numbers alone. And this method includes stakeholders and the case study. For stakeholders analysis, it identifies, assesses, and understands the interest, influence, and expectation of individuals affected by the policy. Ensures policy are responsive and facilitates bargaining. We have a step there as you can go through one after the other. And then we have for case study it's the in-depth examination of specific policies or intervention within their real life context, and they allow analysts to explore complex phenomena and learn from experiences. And it also have the step to conduct a study, as listed there and expanded in the note also. Another aspect is the policy simulation and forecasting tool, policy simulation and forecasting tool. And these tools predict outcome, it predicts likely outcome of policy intervention before implementation, allowing policymakers to test alternative strategies and make informed decisions under uncertainties. For policy simulation, it is creating a model of the policy environment to experiment with different scenarios and predict consequences. For example, economic model for fiscal policy is an example, and the purpose of policy simulation includes evaluation of policy option, risk assessment, and also decision support. For policy forecasting, it's the predicting future trend of outcome based on historical data and statistical model. An example of this is predicting GDP growth or employment trends, and the purpose include anticipation of future trends, support strategic planning, and also early warning system. Lastly, on what we need to discuss in this module, we will be looking at the evidence-based policy making, which is the systematic use of reliable, valid, and relevant evidence from research, data analysis, and practical experience to guide policy formulation, implementation, and evaluation. And principles of evidence-based policy include using robust data and researches, transparency and accountability, which deals with the decision-making process are clear and evidence-supported, and the integration of multiple evidence sources also is another principle, which talks about the combination of quantitative and qualitative insight for comprehensive understanding. And the last, which is the continuous learning and adaptation, it talks about the policy are regularly evaluated and adjusted based on evidence. And conclusion, policy analysis provides structured framework and tools for effective policy formulation, implementation, and evaluation, as we've discussed. We've looked at quantitative and qualitative method in policy, and also we've looked at policy circle. We've also seen the evidence-based approach, which enhance transparency and sustainability. Although challenges like data gap and political constraints exist, systematic analysis helps government address complex issues and maximize public resources. Thank you.